Hey y'all, this is Thoughts Between Shots, a storytelling podcast where one great question leads to one unforgettable story. I'm your host, Nami Sarur, and every episode, I ask my guest to tell me a story, and then we break it down. If you want to learn to tell better stories, ask better questions, or basically just become a better communicator, you're in the right place. My guest today is Renee Frojo. Renee, I have one question for you. Tell me about a time recently that you experienced a big change and maybe what it taught you.
Well, if you've ever been through a big breakup, you know that your diet is the first thing to go. Either you eat all of your feelings or you don't eat anything at all. And I'm usually one to lose my appetite for whatever reason. And when I was in the process of divorcing my husband of 7 years, my partner of 10, and the father of my two children, I hardly ate anything at all. I was reeling and trying to figure out how I was going to move forward. And I just had no appetite. And then when I realized that my pants no longer fit and I was fitting into jeans that I wore in high school, I got another idea for how to cope with my divorce. I decided I was going to start dating, like really dating, like going on all the dates. I got this idea in my head that I was going to date every single person in San Francisco that I could find on the dating apps. And it was really, I think it was a way to get a taste of what was ahead of me, to search for other possibilities or to just have a distraction. But in retrospect, I think I was also seeking validation to know that, even with two kids and entering my late 30s, that I was still someone people wanted to be with. So I entered all these dates in this sort of wreckage of my life, having lost anything. And for the first time, really feeling like I had nothing left to lose. So I went in entirely unapologetically as myself into all of these first dates. I was truly open and vulnerable for the first time. And I hadn't realized how much I had held in, truly, how much I really didn't wear my heart on my sleeve or allow people just to be okay with having people take me as I am, without having to conform to some idea of what people wanted. And after about approximately a million dates, I really realized two major things. Um, Sometimes it takes being in the most vulnerable place of your life to actually be able to be vulnerable and allow yourself to be intimate and have intimacy with people. So while I had plenty of second, third dates and ended up now having a beautiful 5-year relationship out of it, I say to people, I never had a bad date because every single one of those opportunities and encounters was a chance to really see somebody and allow myself to be seen because I opened up. And therefore, by opening up, I allowed others the space and the comfort level and the trust to be able to open up and return to me. So I learned so much about other people's stories and perspectives and how they are. And we didn't necessarily see eye to eye on everything or have a lot in common, but we had a connection, right? So I made a connection with every single stranger that I met. Um, so what I learned ultimately was that really unlocking the ability to truly connect with other people and feel seen and be seen and see others, you first have to allow yourself to do so. You have to truly understand who you are and show that person to the world. And that's been the whole premise of all my work. It's allowed me to really connect with people on a deeper level and sort of bridge this gap with people who don't think like me necessarily, haven't had the same experiences, don't come from the same background or worldview, but we can always find a point of connection, I think, in our humanity. So that is something I continue to learn from.
I am so I can relate so hard to this because I think you and I first connected. I mean, I know we had kind of known a lot of the same people on LinkedIn, but I think one of the times we really connected was when I had I think I'd made a video about one of my dating stories, like dating mishaps or horror stories. And I think
Hmm.
that's when you sent me a really nice message, and it seemed like you've been through the same, or at least a similar experience. So it's cool to hear you talk about your post divorce dating stories. I have so much to say about that. But before we get into that, let's hear about who you are and what you do. So, who is Renee Froyo?
The short story is I'm a journalist turned brand storyteller. And I now teach a lot of B2B entrepreneurs and founders uh, storytelling, really how to harness storytelling, and really dig into the principles of human psychology and what make people tick and what make people connect to build influence, to build a presence, to build a platform, to then be able to get people into your sphere, your world that you're building around the problem that you're solving, through your company, through your business, through your startup. So I do that through one-on-one sprints, brand sprints, we call them, storytelling sprints, through what I call story
Mm,
mining. I really like use my journalism skills to interview people,
mm.
and dig all those stories out for really rich content that attracts the right audience, right buyers, and not just attracts them, but really keeps them around.
So it's interesting that, I mean, first of all, as a journalist, what I always ask every journalist this: what is one question you ask most commonly that gets probably the richest quality of responses?
Why? And what was the purpose? And why now? And why those people? And why this problem? Why? I ask why in various iterations over and over again, and that's always one of the most revealing questions. And some people sometimes don't know, and we really have to dig into it, and it unlocks things that they hadn't considered. But right now, I think what's really important to be thinking about is just making meaning for people and making sense for people out of all the chaos that we're feeling in our
Mhm.
lives because of how rapidly everything's changing, because of how much culture is changing in society and industries and the environment and everything related to AI, right? Um, and I think if you can be one of the people that's really making sense of some of those things within as it's related to your specific niche or industry or problem that you're solving, um, you're going to be a person that people gravitate towards because we're all looking for clarity and answers, right? We're all
Yeah.
looking for someone to make sense of the chaos and create a new worldview for us, or a new mental model, or a new just way of
Mhm.
thinking about it, so that we can have a better grasp on how to solve the problems that we need to solve.
Yeah. So, getting back to your dating story and thinking about those early experiences when you first decided to get out there into the dating world, I know you said you've never had a bad date, which in my head, I'm like, how? Because I had some really interesting, very terrible dates. Part of it was from my own lack of experience in the dating scene, uh, because I had only ever dated technically one person before I got divorced, and so yeah, I had zero experience. But also, do you think partly it was because of how you maybe approached it as a storyteller, both from the sense of being a storyteller and also how you received others' stories? Did you sort of take a storyteller's approach and maybe that helped? Or tell me about that whole aspect.
That's a great question. Yeah, I think it's really important if you really want to have a sort of a depth of connection. It is a storyteller's approach, but it's really just grounded in curiosity, like genuine curiosity, not approaching it from I need to tell this person, or let this person know what my worldview is and my perspective is and how I see things, but really try to understand what theirs is.
Mm,
Right. So it's like a place of real curiosity of like why you think this way, or why you believe that thing, or why you approach, you know, the world in this way. And
yeah.
so, yeah, I do think that that is an important skill set that needs to be it's some people have it like more inherently than others, but it's like when I'm trying to cultivate in my kids, for instance, because I think it's one
Mhm.
of the most critical ones of our time is just like having a genuine curiosity of other people. So yeah, I think the storyteller's approach, being a great storyteller, starts with being a curious person who notices things and has questions, right? You
Yeah.
can't be a good storyteller without having those two, critical pieces, because you're collecting the raw data to then turn it into a story, to give it meaning, to turn it into a story, right? So yeah, approaching with curiosity and really listening to understand, not listening to respond, right? And then asking questions that get you there, to get you to that, not just making assumptions, because we all the time, even with people that we're really close to, like even our partners or our husbands or our kids, like we assume that we understood what they were saying, as opposed to clarifying and making sure we understood, giving them opportunity. So yeah, that is definitely an important piece of how to have more open, interesting, illuminating, insightful conversations with people.
And that's a great approach for, yeah, both parties to take, right? Because I know one of the things that I try to tell my audience a lot. I mean, a lot of them, I talk to them in a very professional sort of environment. The whole premise behind why I teach storytelling is so that they can get better at their jobs. And a lot of these people are very highly technically skilled individuals, but they just suck at talking about themselves in a way that gets them noticed. And
Yeah.
exactly,
Or
yeah,
makes
because
anyone
to them,
care, right?
yeah,
That's it.
because to us, I mean, especially a lot of us grew up thinking, especially in immigrant communities, it was so much about don't attract the wrong kind of attention. But partly that was also don't brag, because it was very much put your head down and work, and that's all you need to do. And that unfortunately also then tends to get into the social arena where,
hmm
I mean, to be very honest, a lot of these people are out in the dating world. And I say, use the same principles when you're in the dating world.
It is the same. I mean, I'm
Yeah.
yeah, with this metaphor analogy keeps coming up. I'm currently working on a 2-day boot camp with someone an expert strategist in community building and an expert strategist in newsletter building and
Mm.
retention, right? So where there's three parts. So I'm coming in to teach audience building. He's then showing us how to turn that audience into subscribers to a newsletter so that you own that audience, and then in the effort of then turning that into recurring revenue in a paid community, right? So that's
Mm.
kind of the three steps that you need to take for that end goal for people who are interested in building community. And we're like, it's totally like dating. It's attraction. Everyone talks about how to attract it, but very few people know how to retain. But it's attraction, retention. And it's like, yeah, you attract the attention, right? By building an audience on social media, by telling your story, by doing these different things. And then you retain it by continuing to build trust, by continuing to, deliver that value and build that credibility. And then you ask them to marry you, like, but you're
Mm.
constantly, it's like every email is a new, it's a new date that
Yeah.
you're going on to show them that
Yeah.
they want more. Yes, they want to invest
Mhm.
in being in a community with you, as an example. But it's the same as like any paying customer, right? You gotta attract them, you gotta make them want more and stick around, and then you get them to stay. But yeah, it's the same.
Yeah.
It's the same approach. But you can't expect that without giving some of yourself. And I know that's challenging too. For context, my ex-husband was Indian, so I
Oh,
also,
really?
yeah,
Wow.
so
Okay.
I've experienced a bit of, that culture from his side of the family. I
Mhm.
spent 8 weeks in India at one point with his whole mom's side of the family and some of his dad's
Wow.
side of the family. And I thought, I feel like I'm an open book, but like I said, I never really truly allowed myself to be super intimate because I was so guarded. And I
Mhm.
really noticed that with his family also, that there's a lot of surface level talk. We
Yeah.
don't really do a lot of below the surface level talk,
Mm-mm.
which is a disservice to relationships, right? With any kind of
Absolutely.
relationships, personal or professional relationships. So that is like a cultural hang up that I know also we need to work around.
Yeah.
And I don't know I wonder, I'd be curious to hear your thoughts on what you think the root or origin of that is.
I mean, I do a lot of intercultural communication and looking at the different dynamics between especially Asian culture and American culture when I'm trying to teach my clients stuff. And we hear a lot about Asian cultures being collective societies and there being a lot of unspoken rules. That is it actually. It
Yeah.
is. So Asian cultures are what I refer to as high context, meaning there's a lot of shared history, a lot of shared meaning. Things are often said very implicitly because you're supposed to read between the lines. So you may have experienced this where if you say some to anybody Indian, if they ask you, "Are you hungry?" and you say no, they'll still pile food on your plate because the assumption is, oh no, 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 she's being shy and she gets it. She knows the rules because nobody really says, "Yes, I'm hungry, please feed me." So it's always, oh, we're
Mm.
gonna read between the lines and pile food on your plate. So sometimes
So it's making a lot
they
of
will not.
assumptions.
Yeah. So they will not take you at face value if you say, no, I'm not
Yeah.
hungry. But at
Right.
the same time, it's like in America, I think a lot of people then struggle with this when they're used to that
Yeah.
implicit reading between the lines. In America, it's
Yeah.
very say what you mean and mean what you say.
Right.
So,
Right.
yeah, it's just direct versus indirect communication, I think.
Yeah, that's interesting. And we're just in such a globalized world where we don't have each other's rules for how to operate,
Mhm.
right? And it's all a big
Yeah.
melting pot. This is if it's increasingly
Yeah.
important to clarify, right? To ask
Yeah.
questions, to really to not make assumptions, to try to understand,
Yeah.
what people really mean.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Or at the very least to sort of be aware of, okay, these are the different frameworks that we're each operating from, and to
yeah,
name it. Because
yeah,
I think partly, I mean, that's half the battle. If now,
yeah,
I mean, I'm married to a white dude, so now I'm having to constantly talk about our cultural differences, and not in a way
yeah.
that we're like, oh, we're so different, but it's
Right.
always in a way that we're trying to explain to each other, hey, this
Yeah,
is where I'm coming from because
yeah,
this is part of my upbringing, and it
yeah.
just helps so much more. But
Absolutely.
yeah, so getting back to the, this is so fascinating, I could talk about this all day. But also getting back to the story part, because I'm trying to teach my audience about how to write a good story or how to build their own stories.
Yeah.
And you teach this for a living, so what are some tips and tricks you've found to sort of story mine, even for people who really don't see the value in it at all?
Yeah, it's a process that starts with really doing some brand work on yourself and
Mhm.
your business or whatever it is. So it's getting to the core of your mission, vision, values, and your why. Why does this matter? Why does this matter
Mhm.
now? And and kind of outlining your goals first. So what your psychographics essentially. What are my problems, or what
Mhm.
problems have I historically faced? Why am I solving this problem right now? What impact do I want to have on the world, on my community, on this space? Right? What desires do I have? What named and unnamed desires do I have? This is where
Mhm.
you go a little bit deeper and you kind of map those things out. And from that, you start plucking out all these interesting stories. Well, this is how I came to this, right? This is my journey to discovery of this. This is my insights. This is my founder story. This is why these people. This is my customer story. How is this helping them? How has this helped them? Those are other
Mhm.
customer stories. And your vision story is ultimately like the why now. What is changing in the world? What is the status quo and what is no longer true and what's changing, and why this matters for the future and investing in it
Yeah.
now. And then you do the same for your audience, right? So
Mhm.
you have a whole chart where you really break down what your audience cares about, what impact they want to have on the world, what are their desires, what are their problems, what are their goals as it relates to your product or your service. And then you find the intersection of those two. So, I'll give you an example for me. I deeply understand that my audience, for the most part, they have a fear of being seen. My audience is really they're afraid to tell their personal story on social media because they're afraid of exposure. They're afraid of being misunderstood. They're afraid of being taken out of context. They're afraid of putting themselves out there and flopping and having no response. Like it's just all an imposter syndrome, a fear of being seen, right? So then I go back, okay, when is a time that I really was afraid to be seen? What happened? Where was I? There's now 15 stories I could pull from that, right? What changed? What was the trigger? What was the transformation? What led me to this new insight so that I got over that? What was the result? What was the outcome? Now I have a thriving business, all with all inbound leads. I never have to do any outbound. I never have to chase calls because my business all comes to me because of this approach, right? Because of allowing myself to be seen. So it's kind of doing that map on both ends and then finding the intersection. And you get so many stories from there. A framework that I love to share for creating content from your storytelling. Well, so that's to create your narrative that continues to build through your marketing. So if you're just looking to build like a singular brand narrative, I think one of the best frameworks is Donald Biller's story brand framework, which is the hero's journey. That positions your customer as the hero and you as the guide. And then you have the external villain and the internal villain. It's a lot of the same stuff. But it's really one of the best frameworks, I think, for creating like a really cohesive just brand narrative that you can then create a ton of content around.
Yeah, that is, I think, my favorite. I was sort of framework shopping, if you will, for a while. And the minute I saw when I saw Storybrand, that became my definitive template for everything. It's so, so brilliant.
Yeah.
But yeah, thank you so much, Renee. I'm sure that my audience wants to follow more of your stuff and they want to know more about where they can follow you, all of that stuff. So where can they find you? What do you want to plug? Anything fun and new you're doing?
Yeah. They can find me on LinkedIn under my name, Renee Lynn Frojo. I have a newsletter called A Good Reputation where I talk about this stuff every week. Yeah, I really dig into sustainable brand building week to week and trends and things that I'm noticing. I will have another storytelling cohort for personal brand storytelling for short form. So literally how to use storytelling to grow on social media. Because it's not all the hero's journey. If you do the hero's journey on social media, you're going to bore people to death and just be tuned out. And this 3-day boot camp, if anyone's interested in eventually growing a community, it's the 30-day launch plan for everything you need to do that, starting with audience building through storytelling.
Thank you so much. And thank you for joining us from your travels, which was so awesome. Everyone, please go check her out. All her information will be tagged below, so you can find it there. Thank you so much, Renee.
Thank you so much.
And that's a wrap on this episode of Thoughts Between Shots. If you laughed, cried, got goosebumps, learned something sneaky useful, share this with your people. And if you have a killer question or a great storyteller to pitch, hit me up in the DMs and let me know. Until next time, keep being curious and keep telling good stories. Bye.